Good afternoon, everyone. As you're joining us, we want to let you know we are so thankful that you're here with Operation Parent and Sarah Kimmel with the founder of Family Tech this afternoon. We're super excited that you've taken time out of your busy day to join us, and we can't wait to get started learning together. I want to let you know about a couple things in the system as we're getting started so that you know how to participate and be here with us this afternoon. So you're going to have, if you happen to be on a laptop, you'll have a orange arrow at the top of your screen. If you're on your phone, it might look a little bit different, but you still can participate as well. But if you will tap on that orange arrow and open your control panel all the way up, if you have that option, you are going to see a question feature middle down on the control panel. And that is where you're going to send us your comments and feedback and interactions today during the webinar. So they're going to come to us privately, so just know that if you're sending questions at the end that you want to make sure that are private directly for Sarah, and we will process those and get those questions back out to Sarah at the end. The Q&A is always one of the highlight parts of our webinar program, so do know that we've got great time at the end of our webinar for the Q&A. We've got some awesome handouts lined up for you today. One is one of Sarah's pieces, and it's a tech reset. So I highly encourage you to not only print that out, but utilize it. It's going to be a great way to look at how you're utilizing your technology as a parent and what you might be role modeling for your teens. So it's an actual 10-day tech reset that helps you look at the positives and negatives of maybe the time that you're spending on your device, as well as the content that you are taking in on social media. So I'm planning on participating in that directly following our webinar, doing a 10-day tech reset, and I hope that you might join us as well doing that. Our second handout is from the Boston's Children's Tech Lab, and it's a little sheet that reminds you on you can use it to coach your teen on, is tech controlling your teen, or is your tech in control of their technology? And it looks at, it's just a graphical reminder for them to think about, is their content and what they're putting out in the universe on their social media accounts, is it mindful? Is it healthy? Is it constructive? And is it kind? So both of those supplemental resources today are awesome, and I hope that you'll check them out. You should have received them in an email from us prior to coming live with us. So you would have, make sure though that you check the email that you registered. So whatever email you registered for the webinar, that would be the email that the handout went to. We have, I mentioned the Q&A as well. We are recording this webinar, so that's a question that we get a lot is, can we get a recording of the webinar? And absolutely, you will get a recording, you'll get the certificate of attendance, and you're also going to get a link to the survey. So the short survey link is going to come to you immediately at the close of the webinar, and we ask that you take just 3 or 4 minutes and fill that survey out. I promise you that we utilize that survey to the fullest, and we are grateful for all of the kind interaction and the high participation on that survey. It really does guide us on this webinar program. So please give us a little bit of your time at the end and let us know your thoughts about the webinar program. So I think those are the nitty-gritties about participating. And like I mentioned at the beginning, we are so happy that you're here with us today. Today we're going to talk about how to make the internet safer with Sarah Kimmel from Family Tech. And I am just so thrilled for you to meet her. She has been a joy to work with. She has over 20 years of tech experience, and she has recently produced 2 different webinars with us. And I'd really like for you to go and view her first webinar up on our website. It is action-packed as well, and so we've got that up on the website, and you can go and check that out at your convenience and listen and view the webinar as you can. But Sarah, we're so grateful for you for doing both of these webinars with us. You have been the best to work with. You have so much tech knowledge, and I use it personally in my own home. I should say, as a fan of your work, subscribing to your YouTube channel has been really helpful. So you put so much content out, and you tend to have it fold to your YouTube channel. And what I mean by that specifically, as for all of us busy parents, when you're trying to figure out the complicated tech world, what we need is easy to follow, quick instructions. Tell me exactly what I need to do. And your content is so practical and so easy to understand and implement in like a short amount of time. And so we value you for everything that you're teaching us, and we can't wait to learn with you today as well.
Well, thank you so much, Michelle. It's awesome to be here once again. I've really enjoyed doing these webinars for Operation Parent, so I'm glad that you are here with us today too. So yes, as Michelle said, I have over 20 years of IT experience. I've been an IT manager for small to medium-sized businesses for over 20 years, where I help them from anything from I got a virus to our servers completely down. So I've been in the IT world for quite a bit. During that time, I created my website, familytechzone.com, where I help busy families become the experts of technology in their own home. So we'll get into that a little bit more. During the course of that, I've pivoted more of my content to my YouTube channel and my Instagram page. You can find me on any social platform. I am at Family Tech on all platforms, but I'm frequently featured on local news and lifestyle TV shows. I've been flown all over the world for different presentations and things like that. So I'm again happy to be here, and that's just a little bit about me. So let's talk about the dangers of the internet. So there are 6 main categories that I really want to talk about today. And I'm not really going to say like dangers because I'm not a fear monger. I think technology is awesome, but these are the 6 areas that you really should just pay attention to and watch out for. So the first one is going to be inappropriate content. I would assume that most of you are here because you want to help protect your family from inappropriate content. So we'll get into that and we'll really dig into that. The next one is malware, how to keep your computers safe from those viruses and things that you can encounter and how those get on your computer. And then the next one is social interactions. So the interactions that your kids are having online, even the interactions that you're having online, it's important to understand what those are, where they can interact with other people, and how to protect them from that. And then time spent. That's a big one too that a lot of parents ask me about when their kids are spending just hours and hours online, how to kind of bring that back in and make sure that everyone is spending the appropriate amount of time and what that can entail. And then we'll talk about scams. So it's really important for you to understand what scams are out there and make sure that you can avoid those because you know what they are. And then the last one we'll talk about briefly is distractions, because we all get distracted by technology these days, and it's easy to kind of fall into those rabbit holes and those traps. And so how to kind of help you get around those distractions. So let's start with inappropriate content. We want to keep out the bad, but give access to the good. Because like I said, there's so much great technology out there that you really want to be able to access that, but you also don't want them, your kids, or even you to come across inappropriate content. So what does that look like? Let's talk about it. So the first thing that you'll need to do as a family is discuss what you consider to be inappropriate, because this really can be different for every family, and even some different members of the family can handle some more scary things and some members of the family can't. So what is inappropriate in your household? And that's going to be something that you really want to understand and figure out as a family. So some of these things can include pornography, violence. How much violence are you okay with? Are you okay with something that's really gory, or if you're okay with something that is like violent but doesn't have a lot of gore? Really dig into exactly what that means for your family. And then social media. Some families ban social media or maybe ban it until a certain age. So really figure out what social media you are going to allow and what on that social media is going to be appropriate and inappropriate. And then even gaming, because there's a lot of games that can have inappropriate content. So what kind of games are going to be okay in your house? Are you going to be okay with a first person shooter where they are shooting other people in the game? Or would you prefer something a little more benign, like, Mario type things where they're going to be jumping on an enemy to kill them or things like that? So that's what you're really going to have to figure out. What is going to be considered inappropriate in your house? So the next thing you need to figure out is how this inappropriate content will be accessed, because 9 times out of 10, it's going to get accessed at some point in your home. So a few of the different ways that it can be accessed is, the first way is accidentally. And when these inappropriate websites do not their social media, their search engine optimization, sometimes they will target things that kids might be searching for so that they show up on the search results and the kids click on it and it's an inappropriate site. And they are doing that on purpose. So it can be accidental that your kid is encountering this inappropriate content. They're watching a YouTube video and then something comes up, or if they're playing a game and an ad comes up that's inappropriate. There's so many ways that inappropriate content can be accessed, through no fault of their own. So you need to prepare them for these accidental interactions. The next one would be on purpose, where they're actually searching for the inappropriate content. And you're going to need to have a way to help block them from that access or things like that. So on purpose is another one that is going to be something you want to discuss. The next one is through a friend. So I'm sitting on the bus, my friend is sitting next to me and they're showing me something on their phone. So you really need to prepare your kids for all three of these ways that they can access inappropriate content. So you have a family meeting and you say, okay, let's say you're doing research for a school project and you come across something inappropriate. What do you do next? And then, okay, you're on the bus and somebody shows you something inappropriate. What are you going to do next? And having these role play scenarios is really going to help you prepare your kids for these exposures. And so then how can we prevent this access? So the first thing is filters on the device itself. So if you have, say, like an iPhone, you can set up screen time with some age restrictions on the web browser. Now, it's only going to affect Safari because it's through screen time. So you can also set up something on the device itself that can be a content filter. There's an app called Canopy, and we'll get into like specific apps a little bit later, but an app called Canopy can filter out the content in real time using AI. So it kind of scans through the page before it displays it and will block out the images that it sees as inappropriate. So different filters you can put on the device itself. The next layer would be a filter on the network. So if you have a Wi-Fi network, which most of you probably do, then you can set up a filter on that network so that anything that connects to the internet through that Wi-Fi will be filtered. So we'll talk about more specifically OpenDNS a little bit later. but it's something you can set up, and all of the content, so whether they're on a gaming system, whether they're on a laptop or a phone, as long as they're going through your Wi-Fi, it's going to go through that content filter. And so then the next thing you can do is to turn on things like safe search. So with Google, if you turn on safe search, it's going to put search results that are appropriate. Now, again, every family is different, so those search results can be inappropriate for some people. So if there's researching like sex education, Google will deem that as appropriate because it's an educational thing and not necessarily pornography. So you really have to figure out in your family what is going to be appropriate in that regard. But if you turn on safe search, just know it's not a catch-all. It's going to still display content that Google determines is safe. And then the next thing you need to watch out for is guest access on your network. So let's say you have a child coming over to your house and they get on your Wi-Fi, then make sure that that device is also protected. So that's going to help if you have a content filter on the Wi-Fi itself, but you also need to know what kind of content that device can encounter. So if you have a Wi-Fi router that has specific parental controls, when they connect to the internet, you can assign them a profile with younger content filter so that they're not able to access some of the stuff that an unfiltered device would be able to access. So those are kind of the areas that you can use to help prevent access from inappropriate content. And again, most of these options will have different settings, so you can turn on or turn off access to pornography, but still allow access to violent content or something like that. You can really customize that so that you can go back to the beginning of what you consider to be appropriate or inappropriate in your family. The next threat is malware. So the actual biggest threat to your network security is you. So the most common thing that happens with malware is something that you have done, or something that you made a mistake. So what is the different kinds of malware? So viruses are actually labeled as malware. Malware just means malicious software. So, a virus that is something that's downloaded to your computer that kind of replicates itself and destroys files, that's a virus. The next is ransomware, which basically will install on your computer, and just like it sounds, it's going to lock up access to your files or lock up access to your computer itself until you pay a fee to the hackers. And once you pay that fee, it's about a 50-50 chance that you'll actually get access back to your computer. So that's something to be aware of, is ransomware. Even if you pay, you may not get access. So you're going to want to have other means to make sure you can resume access to your stuff, whether you're backing up your computer and then you just restore your backup, or things like that. And then adware, again, kind of just like it sounds. As you're browsing the internet, you constantly get all these pop-ups, then most likely you have adware on your computer, and it's just going to put a lot of ads on your computer. So that's what adware is. So how does my computer get malware? Most of the time it is from visiting hacked sites. So a site that I go to every day sometimes can get compromised and they put in malicious code into that website. You go to that website just like you do every day, and then that code gets downloaded onto your computer. So that's one way that through no fault of your own, you're getting that malicious software. Then clicking on links either in an email or online, something gets emailed to you and it says, oh, your account is compromised, click here to fix it, and you click and you can get access to malware that way. And then installing compromised software. So if you're looking for free software from something, then you click on it and you download it, and it can be malicious software. I see this a lot. If you get a pop-up that says that you have a virus on your computer, a lot of people will fall for that. It's actually just an ad, but it can look like a system notification. And when you click on that, it's going to help you get rid of the virus. And what it's actually doing is installing a virus. So just be careful what you're clicking on and what you're doing. So how can you protect yourself? You want to install antivirus on your computer. My recommendation is ESET, ESET. It's a very lightweight antivirus program that just runs on your computer and quietly protects you. The other thing is to have network security on your router. So there's specific routers that have security built in. The router that I recommend the most is called the Griffin, and it has security where it's going to prevent access to malware infected sites. So that first one where you're visiting a compromised site, it's going to prevent access to that. And it's also going to do other things to make sure that other devices like light switches and things on your network are not getting compromised. And then the biggest thing is just awareness and knowledge. I know that these scams are out there, and we'll talk about some of the more specific scams it later. But just being aware that, when I get this pop-up that says my computer has a virus, to not believe it and to, shut down the computer and go around it and then run a virus scan yourself. Not through that pop-up for sure. But so just being aware is going to really help you overcome that hump and make sure that the malware does not get onto your computer and onto your network. The next thing we want to talk about is social interactions. And, we see this with bullying, predators online, peer pressure. There's so much on social media that can really be damaging to all members of the family. So let's talk about it a little bit more. So the first thing is, what kind of social interactions should you be aware of? The first one is direct messages or private messages are everywhere. And I mean places where people are not even expecting private messages to be accessible. So there was a Bible app that has private messaging. There was Pinterest has private messaging. And a lot of people will just get on Pinterest and, look for recipes, not even realizing that it can be a damaging place for social interactions. And so really making sure you understand all of the capabilities of any app you allow your child to download onto their device, and make sure, does it have direct message capabilities, or does it have a way to communicate with strangers? So that's one place that a lot of people are not understanding that social interactions are happening. The next one is through gaming. So if I am playing an online game, I could be in a chat with somebody, and I can even take that chat into like a private chat room on some gaming platforms. So what games are they playing? Are they playing online? Who are they playing with? And what are they saying in those interactions are going to be really important for you to understand. So what rules should you, and then sorry, through online documents. This is one where kids are trying to be sneaky, and they'll open up a Google Doc because they have access to Google Docs through their school account or a Google account on their own. And so they create a Google Doc and they share that Google Doc with a friend, and then they chat back and forth just within that Google Doc. And this helps them get around any like monitoring programs that might be installed. So they are just, using this Google Doc to chat. Some people were also using Spotify, and they were just changing the names of the songs or changing the title of the playlist in order to chat back and forth. So there's a lot of ways that kids can try and like sneakily get around different monitoring programs and different restrictions so they can still chat with their friends, or even through chat with strangers. So what kind of rules should you set? The first rule of thumb that I always set is no chatting in a private message with a stranger. So I'm okay if they're in an online game, like Fortnite, Among Us. It's going to put a bunch of strangers together, and they do have to chat to communicate. To coordinate, attacks or things like that. So they do have to chat in those circumstances with strangers. But the key here is no private messages with any strangers. So whether they're chatting privately on, Discord or inside Roblox or anything like that, if it's a stranger, it is not allowed. The next one is no public personal information. So as they're chatting in like Among Us or in Fortnite, then you make sure that they are not sending any public personal information or any personal information in a public forum. So their school, their name, their parents' name, the city they live in, their phone number, any of their social media handles, things like that. Anything that can personally identify them, then that is not allowed to be said in a public forum. So within a public game or anything like that. So no personal information, and then no inappropriate behavior. I have a friend whose son got banned from Xbox because they were cursing in an online chat in a game. So it is really important for you to help them understand that any inappropriate behavior they display in social media might come back to kick them later on. And I like to show them different articles and things of celebrities who get canceled for something they said 10 years ago, um, because it was inappropriate. And now like people are seeing it and they are upset about it. So I'm like, you don't want to regret something that you've said while you're a teenager, later in life. So no inappropriate behavior is going to be the rule of the day there. And so can I monitor or block these interactions? Like I said, some of these interactions kids are very sneaky about, like using Google Docs or something like that. So what you can do is block different apps from your router. So if you don't want them to access Instagram, you can block Instagram from your router, or you can block these apps from the device itself. So if I have an iPhone, I can use screen time to block the apps. If my children have an Android device, I can use Google Family Link to block access to these different apps. So there's a lot of places that you can block access to specific apps. But if you want to monitor their social media accounts, that's a whole different ballgame, because there's management of a device and then there's monitoring of a device. And I will put in my little plug here that monitoring an iOS device, so if your child has an iPhone, is going to be 100 times harder than monitoring an Android device. Now, the management portion is about the same. So if I need to manage time limits or anything like that on either device, I can do that very easily. But when it comes to monitoring, Apple really cares about the privacy of its users, even if that user is a 10-year-old. So any third-party apps are going to be extremely limited on what they can monitor if the child has an iPhone. So if the child has an Android device, you can use something like Bark or something like, um, you know, Custodio or any of these other third-party applications to monitor that content. So you can monitor inside direct messages in Snapchat or direct messages in Instagram, and you can monitor things that they save to Dropbox or things like that. So there's a lot more that you can do through a Android device than you can for an iPhone. You can have an iPhone yourself as long as you are managing the Android device for your child. So that's my little plug on that. Monitoring on an Android is so much easier than monitoring on an iPhone. So that is social interactions. So the next section we've got here is time spent. How long is too long? What are the signs? What are we doing? Are we able to figure out how long we're spending on the internet? So here's a few tips for you on time spent. The first one is app control. Again, we kind of talked about this a little bit, but whether or not you can install an application on your phone, but you can also set up time limits for specific applications. And this goes across the board. Like I said, managing an iPhone and managing an Android is basically the same, just different apps to do so. And if your child has an iPhone and you have an Android, it's actually very difficult to manage that as well, because you have to have an iPhone to manage an iPhone. The opposite's not true. If you have an iPhone, you can manage an Android just fine. But anyway, you can set up time limits for specific applications. So let's say your child spends too long on Instagram or they spend too long on YouTube. You can set a time limit for that specific app and it will block their access to that app after they've reached that time limit. Then what I would also do is block the access to uninstall applications. And doing so because sometimes kids are tricky and they'll try and get around these controls, right? So they will uninstall the application and reinstall it, and it basically resets the time limit for that application. So they hit their hour time limit, they uninstall the application, reinstall the application, they've got another hour to go. So that's one thing I would block, is blocking access to uninstall the application. And then you can also sometimes set what apps can be used when. So, okay, I will allow you to use Spotify during the night or something because you like to listen to music, but you can't listen to it during the school day or something like that. Or blocking access to social media during school so they can concentrate on their schoolwork. So, making sure that you have control over when apps are used, how long they're used, and whether or not they can be installed or uninstalled. The next thing we've got is time limits. So again, we're talking about time spent on these different applications. So you can limit time spent browsing the internet, or you can shut it down at bedtime. And this is one of the things that I really reiterate a lot, is making sure that the internet is not accessible at bedtime. Nobody needs to be online at 2 a.m. And I usually say that for the entire house. So we model that same behavior. If I need my sleep, you also need your sleep. So making sure that the entire device, the internet, everything shuts down at bedtime. And you can do that through different means. So, like I said, with the router, you can shut down the internet at that point. You can also shut down access to the device at bedtime. And that's accomplished through Apple Screen Time or Google Family Link or through Microsoft Family Safety if it's a laptop. And then that way the device is not even accessible, because if they try to turn it on and do things that are not online, it's not going to matter if they have access to the internet or not. So if they've downloaded videos or anything, or if they have a game that they can play offline, they could do all of that at when it's time for bed, and that's still not going to allow them the appropriate amount of sleep. So I think that's so important to make sure that devices and the internet are shut down at bedtime. The next thing is homework time. Again, we can all get down rabbit holes and get distracted, and we'll talk more about distractions. But if you make sure that only specific apps are available when they're supposed to be doing homework or where they're supposed to be at school, then that's going to be really important, a really important time limit to set. And then overall device time. Like I said, there's a lot of things they can do on the internet that doesn't, or there's a lot of things they can do on their device that doesn't necessarily require an internet connection. So making sure that if you've set a time limit on the Wi-Fi router, make sure you've also set a time limit on the device itself, because that will lock off access to the device when that time frame is concluded. And then on demand, this is one of my favorite things to do, is to just shut down access to the internet or shut down access to a device at any given time. I do this the most during the summer. So I wake up before the rest of my family, and I will shut off access to the internet for my kids' devices, and then they have to do their chores in order to gain access to the internet. So I just make sure that that's completely shut down, and then they do their chores, and then they can come to me. I can check, make sure the chores are done, and then I can open it back up. But you can also do this for like dinner time. If, hey, it's time for dinner, shut down access to your devices. Or if they get grounded, shut down access to the devices. So those are some of the things that you can do with regard to that. So how can I tell when my child is spending too long on the internet? So the first thing I really try and key into is behavior changes. So if they're playing a game online and they seem to be getting increasingly frustrated, or they're getting angry very quickly, or their mood is changed, or their demeanor is changed, then that's maybe a sign that they're done for the day. So I don't necessarily, I will set up time limits for my kids' devices, but I'm pretty free with granting time extension requests. But I like to get those in those increments. So like I'll give them an hour during the day. And then once they hit that hour, they have to come to me and say, hey, can I have more time? I can make sure, okay, did you do your homework? Did you do your chores? Can you go take out the trash or something like that? And it gives them these natural breaks in the day where I'm not going to give them a huge amount of time to start with. I give them a smaller window of time, and then I grant smaller windows throughout the day, but I'm not tracking really their overall time because I am just making sure I see the behavior. I'm checking in with them on a frequent basis as they're asking for these extension requests. And I can see if they're getting really frustrated, they're showing signs that they've spent too much time. And I'm like, yeah, no, you're done for the day, and, go outside and do something different or something like that. So I really kind of try and key into those behavior changes. Then you can also look at the reports from the devices itself. So most devices will have screen time reports that you can look at and say, oh my goodness, you've spent 8 hours on Instagram. That's too much. Let's go ahead and start limiting that time frame for the day. And then signs of addiction. Are they, if you shut it down for the day, or if you shut it down for dinner time, are they antsy to get back to their device? If they're, constantly wanting to check on their device, if you're constantly wanting to check on your device, just look for those signs of addiction to the device, and then maybe try and adjust the time frame for those behaviors. So the next thing I want to talk about is scams. And this one I think is so important. From phishing to purchases, do you know what to watch out for? Because like I said, the biggest threat to your network security is actually you. Most of the biggest compromises, or the biggest breaches in business, came from an individual employee, and something that they did that was a mistake or something like that. So being aware of what's out there is really, really important when it comes to protecting yourself and your network from different attacks. So what kind of scams should I watch out for? The first one is a phishing attack. Like I said, with phishing, it's really kind of a spray and pray kind of scenario where the attacker is going to send the same email to hundreds of thousands of people at once. And they're just hoping that people bite and click the link or give their information to somebody. It doesn't have any personal information in the email. It's really just sent to everybody. So that's a phishing attack. And really, they're trying to get information from you. They're phishing for information. So the next kind of level to that is a spear phishing attack. Now, a spear phishing attack is different in the fact where it is targeted to you. And a lot of people will say, I'm nobody. Why would anybody target me to attack me? Well, they're really smart, and they have a whole business that is looking for this information, and they're really efficient about it. So what the spear phishing attack will likely do is look at your social media and say, okay, say you're on LinkedIn, and it's going to see who your boss is, who your coworkers are, and it's going to send you an email from your boss that says, hey, I have an urgent request. I need you to get these gift cards for a friend. I've already talked to Natalie, your coworker, and blah, blah, blah. So it's really targeted. And because of that, and because people don't think that somebody's going to reach out to them, they fall for it very easily. So a spear phishing attack is highly targeted, and it will have information that they've gathered from social media to target you and to attack you. The other thing is purchasing hard to find items. So, when the PlayStation 5 was totally out of stock everywhere, people would advertise, hey, I have this PlayStation 5 available to purchase. And then that can be a scam. And then pop-up notices or ads, like I mentioned, it's a pop-up. It says you have a virus, and you click on it, and that is the virus that comes into your into your computer. So the other one that I didn't put on here is something on social media where they've already compromised your friend, and then you are getting a message from your friend about something, and then you want to send them information. They're phishing for information. It's more of a spear phishing attack because they've already compromised your friend's attack, and then once they get into your account, then they try and compromise your friends. So these are some of the scams that you should watch out for. So how do you protect yourself from these? First, enable two-factor authentication. This is going to be a pain. It's not hard to do, but it is hard to, when you put your password in and then they'll send you a text message, or you have to open an authenticator app and then enter that code in order to gain access. So it is an extra step. It takes longer, but it's going to really help protect you from yourself. So say you have this phishing attack, they have your username and password that you've handed over. They've gotten your username and password by breaching some other company like that you use, like MyFitnessPal. And so they have that access. And so they try to use that access. And then if you have two-factor authentication enabled, it will block them from getting access to your account because they don't have that secondary tool of the code that you've been sent or the code from your authenticator app. Be aware of the warning signs. Grammar is a big warning sign. If they don't sound like your boss or your friend, you're like, oh, my friend has nothing to do with fashion, but I just got a direct message that she's creating a clothing line. So, think about the different warning signs there. And like I said, with grammar, that's actually getting erased pretty quickly with ChatGPT. The attackers can use things like ChatGPT to create very convincing looking emails. So what I usually say is take a breath before you act. You get an email that says thank you for your renewed subscription for, Best Buy, and it's a $500 charge, but it's just an email, and you think right away, oh my gosh, like I'm not going to spend $500, like I can't have that come out of my account. So you call the number and you give them access to your account. So take a breath before you act. Okay, did I like is should I log on to my bank account outside of the email and see if there's a charge pending? Then if there's not, okay, this is a scam. So just take a breath before you try and act. And then verify the sender or link. So if my boss sends me something via email, I can text my boss or message him through like our internal messaging platform, and say, hey, did you send me this email? Somebody's not going to be upset that you tried to verify it was them. Did you send me this email? Yes, I did. Can you get that done for me? Oh, okay. So nobody's going to be mad that you tried to verify who it was. Or, if it's somebody on social media and it's coming from your friend's account. Oh, hey, just quick question. How did we meet again? They won't be able to answer it if they are the attacker. So just making sure you do those things to help protect yourself. Finally, we are talking about distractions. So how can a kid focus when there's so much available to distract them? And really, there's so much available to distract us. And the tech reset that you have available to you can really help you eliminate some of these distractions. But let's talk about what distractions are kids faced with, and really what distractions are we faced with as well. The first is notifications. My phone is giving me notifications on a constant basis. While I've been chatting here, I probably have gotten at least 20 different notifications on my phone. So notifications can be very distracting. So you can go in and disable those notifications. We'll get more into like how do you reduce them in a minute, but so notifications are a huge distraction. There's a study that a notification coming into a kid's device, they take about 15 minutes to get back into learning mode if they're in school. So notifications can be extremely distracting. The next one is easy access to favorite sites. If I'm on the web doing research for a school project, YouTube is just a tab away, and I can just pop that up, or, a gaming site is just right there. And I can easily flip between doing my homework and messing around. So it's so easy to access these favorite sites. And then games can be a huge distraction. If you get really into a game, then it's something that you're thinking about all the time. Oh, I got to go in and level up, or, get addicted to these types of games where I want to finish this level, I want to finish this, I want to beat this boss. And so it can be really distracting as you're thinking about going back and playing that game. Social media obviously is a huge distraction. We can, talk days about how you can get sucked into the YouTube rabbit hole, the TikTok rabbit hole, get sucked into Instagram, and then an hour's gone by, and you're like, oh my goodness, I've totally wasted this entire hour. And then streaming videos. So, Netflix, it goes, um, they'll go one after the other. And then sometimes it'll ask you, are you still watching? Because you're still watching all of these videos. And then that's when I say back to Netflix, stop judging me, Netflix. Yes, I'm still watching. But streaming videos are really easy ways to just kind of get sucked in and get distracted and avoid the rest of the things that you need to do for the day. So, how can you reduce these distractions? So, the first thing to do is really to set times aside when only certain sites are available. So, let's say YouTube is a big distraction for me. I can set so I'm only able to access YouTube during this time of day, or if I'm able to access it for this amount of time for the day. So, setting times aside when only these sites are available is going to really help reduce the distractions when I'm trying to do other things. Putting devices on do not disturb. So my phone actually goes into do not disturb automatically at 10 p.m. every single day. And I think it's so important to make sure that you have that available to you so that you don't have to think about it. It just goes to do not disturb automatically and you are not distracted. So you can set different time frames where you're not disturbed by anything. And then you can also turn off notifications for specific apps. So let's say it's not an app that I really need to know right away if something's going on. I can turn off the notifications for that app specifically, and then I'm not distracted. And when I want to use that app, I can go into the app, see everything that I want to see, and then close it. And then again, I'm not told about the app the rest of the day. I'm really intentional about using that app so I can disable those notifications. And then on personal devices, I can block access to favorite apps. So here's an example that I like to use. If I am on YouTube constantly on my phone, then maybe I need to move YouTube viewing habits to a smart TV. So that way, instead of just kind of anytime I'm bored or, I want to, I'm doing something else on my phone and I get a notification from YouTube and I want to watch it, this way, I'm really intentional about my YouTube viewing. I'm going to my smart TV and I'm watching it there. So I can block access to YouTube from all the other mobile devices on my house. Then it's only accessible through a smart TV. And then that really helps, make you more intentional and not get really sucked down that rabbit hole because it's so easy when it's just tiny and in your hand and able to walk with you everywhere. So I really like to move those. And even like for your kids, moving YouTube viewing or moving something that they access frequently to a bigger environment. So let's say Instagram is something that I really get distracted with on my phone. I can make it so that I only can access Instagram on my computer or something like that. So blocking access to favorite apps on personal devices and moving them to a different device is something that is really helpful to help eliminate these distractions. So I've talked a little bit about these layers of protection, but I want to get into it a little bit further. So on device protections, these can include these in-app controls that I've talked about. So TikTok has an in-app parental control. where you can set time limits and you can make sure to block access to inappropriate content and things like that. So utilizing these in-app controls and seeing if the device or the app that you are using or your kids are using have these in-app controls available. So Roblox has some great in-app controls. So that's your first layer of protection, is putting controls within the app itself, because they're going to have the best access in order to limit what can be seen. So then the next level would be built-in controls on the device. Instead of inside the app, it's a control that's on the device itself. So if I was talking about iOS screen time, Google Family Link, all devices really have their own built-in controls. So the PlayStation 5 has built-in controls, Xbox, Nintendo Switch, all of these devices that your kids use really do have parental controls that you can set. So I would make sure you understand what is available to you there. And then additional filters and controls from third parties. So I mentioned Bark and Canopy. These are apps that you can install on the phone or the device itself to help protect that device as just another layer. So we're going in app and then we're going on the device. This is another on device, but it's an extra layer on the device. And then forcing the device back to the home network. So we're talking about a VPN here. And so the router that I recommend, the Griffin, has this app that's called Homebound. And it really, if your phone is outside of your Wi-Fi network, obviously it's not going to be subject to the controls on the Wi-Fi. So with this Homebound app, it basically forces the device back to your home network, and then it's able to have the same controls as it does when it's on the Wi-Fi. So using a VPN in that way to force these parental controls is going to be another layer of protection. And then so protecting your network, again, this router with built-in controls is going to be a great option for you. If you filter content from the network, it can protect all devices, including gaming systems, smart refrigerators and things like that, that you might not like automatically think inappropriate content can be accessed. It would protect all of that. And we'll talk about open DNS there. And then advanced security to detect malicious intrusions or block access to infected sites. So, making sure you have an antivirus program or you have something on your Wi-Fi that helps with that security level. So making sure that your network is protected as well as your device is protected as well. So like I was just saying with OpenDNS, this is something that you can install on your current router. You can have it available to you today. You can set it up. And here is a quick little video about how to set up OpenDNS. It's free to use. It's a really great content filter that will protect your whole home. Like I said, a smart refrigerator, a gaming system. So let's go ahead and watch this video of how to set up OpenDNS that you can do in your home right now. One of my favorite DNS filters is called OpenDNS. So OpenDNS is actually free for home users, and you can set it up just like this. To set up OpenDNS, go to opendns.com. From here, go to the consumer side. Once you're in the consumer section, go to OpenDNS Home and sign up. There is a paid package as well, which is $20 a year, and it gives you more usage stats and an optional allow list mode, which is basically everything would be blocked except for the things that you have specifically allowed. Go ahead and sign up. When you get to this page, you will see the name servers are these IP addresses. This is what you are going to add to your Wi-Fi router. This is going to be the external name servers that you would enter for that router. After you set up your account, you will be directed to this page to help you set up your Wi-Fi router. This is the name servers for OpenDNS, and this is always the name servers, no matter what your account is. So you will need to write these down and make sure you enter them into the appropriate location in your Wi-Fi router or your modem. You can click here to get instructions on different types of routers and modems. If your router or modem is not listed here, you may want to ask your Wi-Fi router or modem company how to set a manual DNS on their device. Now that you have your account, go ahead and click here to test your settings. Once your Wi-Fi router is configured appropriately, you will see this OpenDNS dashboard. You can see the stats and logs for your network, and you can change the settings for your particular network as well. When you're looking at the settings, you can do a custom settings and block all of the categories that you particularly want blocked. If you look at the stats, you can see the different requests made throughout the day. You can see we use Amazon and Microsoft a whole lot in this house. And that's it. Your content filter is set up and ready to go. Now that you've got your content filter all set up, you should be able to have one extra layer of protection. I like to use multiple layers of protection, as I mentioned. So you can go ahead and get OpenDNS set up on your network today, right now, and have that extra layer of protection. So thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to support my channel, please subscribe, leave me a comment, like this video, and we will see you next Thursday. All right, so hopefully that was a little helpful for you in setting up OpenDNS. Like I said, it's free, it's great to use. I would set that up right now. So the products that I kind of mentioned in this webinar so far, and some that I maybe even haven't mentioned, on the Wi-Fi, I mentioned Griffin Router, I mentioned OpenDNS. Clean browsing is similar to OpenDNS. It is a paid service. OpenDNS is free, but it is a little more user-friendly on clean browsing. So that's just another option that you have. The Griffin router is something that you would purchase to replace the current Wi-Fi router that you have. Phones, TrueMe, Pinwheel, Bark, these are all kids-safe smartphones that have very limited capabilities. You can check out some more information about that. Our last webinar went into those a little bit more, so because it was a different topic, more about like parenting tech and parenting teens. So monitoring, I talked about Bark. Canopy uses AI to protect from inappropriate content. Bark is a great monitoring tool to help get you information on whether, what your kids are looking at and discussing. Guardian is also something that can help manage devices and monitor interactions. Books, Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, great book, especially for talking to young kids about inappropriate content. So I would definitely check that out. There's a junior version and then a regular version. Regular version, I would say for tweens, the junior version for younger than that. Super great book though. Management, like I said, with iOS screen time, Google Family Link, Grace app and RPact are good ones for iOS users. So if you do have an iPhone that you're managing, I would check that out. All the links to all of this is available on familytech.biz/tools. So go ahead and check those out. So how can communities help with this issue? a huge thing is workshop for parents and grandparents and foster parents. So, workshops kind of just like this, but in your community where you're bringing in an expert and helping them really understand technology and understand the pitfalls and what you can do to help avoid those. I think are really important for communities to have these discussions, even if in your school or somewhere like that. And speaking of schools, so how can schools help? Setting up content filters inside the school is so important. A lot of kids will use the Wi-Fi because the cell reception is poor inside schools for the most part. They're brick buildings; it's hard to get reception, and so setting up content filters on the school's Wi-Fi network is very important. Education to kids and even teachers about phishing emails. There's a really great program called White Ribbon Week it's kind of like Red Ribbon Week, but it's all about digital safety and internet safety. So I would definitely, if you are managing your PTA for an elementary school, check into White Ribbon Week and maybe implement that in your school as well. Um, and so let's talk about your questions. We've got a bunch of resources here for you um, to find out if a game is inappropriate, if a movie is inappropriate, if or what White Ribbon Week is. Here's some resources for you. And then another great resource is the Parent Handbook from Operation Parent. So I will pass it over to Michelle to tell you a little bit more about this awesome resource that is available.
Thanks, Sarah. That was an awesome presentation. We have so many questions. I'm not sure how we're going to get through them all, but we'll do our best. So I just wanted to let the audience know that we have an elementary and a middle and high edition, and related to technology, these are just a couple of the topics that we cover. Cell phones, social media, gaming, and healthy tech habits at the elementary level. And then at the middle and high level, looking at screen time, social media, safety, what apps are safe, and as well as gaming habits. And then I'd also, well, first of all, I'm super excited to let our audience know today and share some really exciting news. You are the very first to hear about this. Our Operation Parent 9th edition of our Parent Middle and High Handbook is at the printing press as we speak, which our team is so excited about. This brand new edition is updated and action-packed from cover to cover. Our whole team is super excited and thankful for Nikki Timmons, who led the Handbook Enhancement Project. We wanted to let the audience know it is evidence-based prevention information that we've continued to add to our handbook. Some of our new topics, Sarah, unfortunately, we have to continue to explore and add new resources on social media, red flags. You know, you've given us like a really balanced approach to technology and knowing a lot of things, but we try and get some material out there in front of parents to know what to watch for on the red flag side. So we've added quite a few red flag information on social media. We've also had to add the topic, this is very unfortunate, on child sexual exploitation. And then we added a bunch of conversation starters for families on how to dig in and really address a lot of tough topics. These next topics are already in the parent handbook, as you know, but we've expanded on them and added some more things for parents to think about in fentanyl, gaming, mental health, social media, as well as vaping, which is so prevalent in our teens today. So those of you that are on this webinar get the first opportunity to pre-order this new edition of the handbook before it's released to the public. And so all you have to do that is go to operationparent.org/store. You can add the number of handbooks that you'd like. You can do an individual order just to get a sample for your organization, or you can also do a bulk order this way as well. Um, and you just enter the code as you go to place an order of the middle and high handbook. Enter the code new handbook so that we know to send you this new edition of our parent handbook. Um, okay. And then we also, of course, want you to know how to keep in touch with Sarah. We included that snippet of her YouTube videos so that you could see what I'm talking about in terms of her content is quick and easy to understand and useful in our everyday lives. And I didn't say this earlier, but I want to say it now. Sarah is great about putting out content very regularly. So if there's an issue that you're dealing with, it's likely that she has something already up on her website and in her YouTube. This is a resource that Sarah so generously provided for us, and I really encourage you to check that out, the 10-day Tech Reset ebook. And you can also, printing it out, you have it available to do that in your email as well as downloading it here while we're live in the webinar. But you could also use this code and the QR code to get to it as well. We have a drug prevention program. It's ready, packed, and ready for you to implement in your schools, churches, other organizations. This toolkit is amazing. It helps teenagers ramp up their ability to refuse drugs and alcohol, and vaping as well. And so you can check that out in our shop. Our community advocates are more than willing to talk with you about how the TNT program, our handbooks, how we're planning to use this new handbook across the country to spread our mission of hope and helping parents be better educated about the tough stuff that comes up in our culture. Sarah, you've done a great job getting us ramped up on technology today, and we've got some really great questions. So I'm going to share those with you. So here's the first one. In your own home, what are some of your positive activities that you replace to get your kids off of screens?
I actually have them create a jar with pop. I mean, my kids are 14 and 18 at this point, but we still use the jar. And it has popsicle sticks, and I've made them come up with activities that don't include technology, and we write those on the popsicle sticks, and then when they come to me like, I'm so bored, and I'm like, okay, here you go, let's pick one of these. And so some of them include, reading a book, going on a bike ride, going on a walk, the having them like I'm like, what's this? Crochet, or draw. Like, my daughter's really into drawing, so she has a like a notepad, or in like art supplies, so doing art. My son at one point, that this might lead to more of an addiction kind of thing, but he drew out like a whole computer and like would have you like click. This is when he was a little younger, but like click on something, and then he'd have like a window that was a piece of paper that like he'd bring that window into it. So there's a lot of things, and your kids can get really creative, and so having them kind of have that buy-in where they're creating these popsicle sticks is really helpful, I think, where again it gets them thinking outside the box.
I love that on-demand activity you came up with. And so then you're not trying to scroll through your brain and come up with a lot of things at once. There's something already there in place. It's so creative.
Yeah.
Such a good idea. And do you remember that example you shared with us too? Like, you just do an amazing job of having your teens be aware of their own tech, how long they're on tech. And you had shared with us that your daughter came to you and said, I'm spending too long on Instagram, and you all came up with the solution. Do you mind to remind the audience of what you did there?
Yeah, sure. This was last year. She was getting a little behind on her homework. She came to me and said, I'm spending too long on Instagram. And she was 17 at this point, and I've already let go of a lot of parental controls at that point. So I'm like, do you need me to reinstall the parental controls and shut down Instagram for you? And she's like, no, I can do it on my own. I can go into digital well-being. She still has an Android phone, digital well-being, and block access to Instagram, or even just uninstall it for myself for the week. She's like, can you just tell me I'm grounded from Instagram, and then I'll go ahead and do that. And so I'm like, okay, you're grounded from Instagram. And so she was able to do that on her own. But I love that she was able to figure out that this is what was, keeping her from getting her homework done. And and we talk about how she can make sure she's not getting that distracted.
That's so neat too, because I can tell that there were a lot of conversations leading up to that conversation. A lot of coaching on the way, a lot of open and honesty from you, and just her being comfortable to come to you and just say, like, I need some help. I can tell I'm off the rails a little bit here with the
Yeah.
Instagram, and so kudos to you. That's amazing, amazing job. Um, so let's see. How do you stop your child from changing controls on the app? So that I think that's meaning if you've set up the nighttime shutdown or things like that.
Sure. I mean, and there are obviously so many ways parent or kids can get around parental controls. It's one of my most popular videos on YouTube is how kids are circumventing your parental controls. The problem is most of the viewers are kids that are using that in order to help themselves to circumvent parental controls. So honestly, there's never going to be a foolproof, this is completely locked down. You can make it more difficult through all of these layers of protection, so if you have the phone get shut down at a specific time, you also have the internet get shut down at a specific time. So there's a lot more hoops to jump through. But if they're really, really gonna try it, they're gonna get there. So the conversations is the most important thing, of helping them understand why they're in place, what they're doing, and they're basically a seatbelt for them. So, I always talk about parental controls like a seatbelt. It's not that I don't, it's not that the government doesn't trust us to stay in our seat when we're driving. It's that it's there to protect us for when something goes wrong. And so that's what I really try and instill in them, that this isn't because I don't trust you. It's because I want you to be protected from this and this and this. So really getting their buy-in is going to be the most important thing, because I'm in IT. I've been in IT for 20 years, and I guarantee my kids can get around my parental controls just because there are ways around it. And like I said, you can make it a lot harder for them to get around, but they'll eventually get there if they're enterprising enough. So
Well,
having that conversation
that's
is important.
exactly what one of our viewers in the audience said today, that it's a struggle to control the access because our children, our teens, are way more tech savvy even than we are, and you're super tech savvy. That's what you do all day, every day for your work. But I love that this parent was honest, and I think we've all been there where we're trying to stay ahead of the tech things, and it changes so quickly.
Yeah.
It's changing so quickly, and our teens are getting it so much more in school today than I think we were. Just the tech expertise and just mastering it.
Yeah.
So,
And so that's the other thing is, I really promote trying to be the tech expert of your home, because when your kids have to come to you when there's something wrong with their technology instead of you coming to them when there's something wrong with their technology, at that point they know they are smarter than you on that. So I would definitely refrain from going to your kids for help when you come across something with technology, and really setting yourself up as that resource for your kids. So the more you can research online and understand these things, follow family tech, and once you have that understanding, then they're coming to you, hey, there's something wrong with my computer, and then you've really set up that, like, kind of flip that script and make sure that you're that expert that they're coming to instead of the other way around.
Perfect, perfect advice. Um, so here's another honest parent in our queue. I love the honesty with which the questions were submitted and that we can learn together. So here's the question. My seventh grader continues to abuse how much time he spends on his phone and online. I'll say to this parent, I mean, you're certainly not alone, so we're thankful for you for putting the question in. I'm afraid if I cut him off, I'll be cutting him off from his friends and he'll be left out of activities, which now is not a good time for that. What are your recommendations on a happy medium?
Yeah. Time limits are the biggest thing for that, so the device, and most of the time they're not able to get around the built-in parental control time limit unless they're changing the time on their phone. But once it locks out, it locks out, so for an iOS device, it literally, the screen says time's up and that's it. Like you can't do anything else on that device. And so with Google Family Links, same thing. It just kind of blocks out the entire device. So utilizing those built-in controls is going to be your first step, and setting those time limits. And this way, you also don't completely block them from it. You're not taking their phone, which will completely remove them from these social interactions, but giving them a time limit, saying, okay, you have an hour, coordinate your social calendar in this next hour. And, so that way you're giving them a little bit, but you're also not having that fight, because the phone, it's going to lock itself at a specific point. So at that point, you're like, your time is up. I'm sorry. You should have used your time wisely and talked to your friends instead of played on YouTube or something like that.
Mhm.
So kind of trying to establish that happy medium where you're still giving them access, you're not taking it away completely, but you're making sure that there are time limits enforced.
It's good life lessons too. Just time balancing time and, putting the big things first.
No.
Here's another really good question. So we have a middle schooler and we are considering a phone for them for Christmas. Um, s- and we know that you recommend the Android, but can you remind us again why it's best for monitoring and managing?
Yeah, so Apple cares more about the privacy of their users, even if that privacy is for a 10-year-old. So with an iPhone, applications like Bark, so on Android, you can install Bark on the phone itself. It's monitoring the phone in real time. You're getting alerts in real time. For an iPhone, because of these privacy limitations, you have to install Bark on a computer. And the computer has to be on and running at all times. And it will only monitor the messages on the iPhone once the iPhone returns home and syncs with that computer, because it can't monitor it on the device itself. It can only monitor the backup of the device that's happening on the computer. And so that's kind of one of the ways that a lot of these third party apps kind of get around that limitation, where it can't do it on the phone itself. It can only do it from the backup. And so you'll run into that on all third party applications, parental control applications on an iPhone, because it can't do it on the phone itself. And so you won't have notifications in real time. If they delete something when they're out of the house and then they come back, you'll never get notified about those messages. So it's really limited. Plus, with the Android, because it's on the phone, it can monitor different social media applications like Snapchat and Instagram and things like that. On an iPhone, because it's not on the phone, it can't monitor any of those. So it can only monitor like messages and images and things like that. So it's really, really limited. And all third party applications would be limited in the same way for an iPhone, as opposed to an Android device.
Good advice. So much to think about on so many levels. So, gosh, our kids are so savvy, and we've talked about a bit about the phones and controls. Can you also touch on how as a busy parent, if your child is a little bit older on multiple apps, how do you recommend kind of monitoring across multiple social media apps? And then the second part of that might even be if they have like a second social media or a fake account or something like that. What are some of your thoughts about apps?
Yeah, so again, with an Android device, you're going to be able to monitor a lot better than you would for an iPhone. And like Bark, can monitor across different social media applications. So, my big recommendation is get them an Android. Like, if monitoring is your top concern, like you need to be able to monitor their interactions, then giving them an Android device with Bark installed or something else is really, really going to be important. And I know a lot of kids will push back on the iPhone versus the Android kind of thing, but I know for a fact that if you give the choice of an Android device or no device, they will pick an Android. I promise you that. And so that's going to be super important. Now, with the fake account things, again, with the built-in controls for some of these applications, the built-in app controls. So with TikTok, it has some really great built-in parental control apps where, or not apps, but parental control features that it won't allow the child to log out of that account on their device. Without a parental say so. So they can't switch to a different account that's not managed by the parent. On Instagram, it's a little bit more difficult. You can still monitor what's going on that profile, but you might need the phone itself. And I have a video of how you can check the different, like, check and see if they're logged into multiple accounts. But if they continue to log out of the account, it might be a little more difficult. But yeah, I would just see if like all of their friends are following a particular account. Like, it's really hard, but you got to like really, really dig. And you might be able to find a secondary account. I will say though, in defense of the kids, just because they have like a secondary Instagram account, it doesn't necessarily mean they're trying to hide anything. A lot of kids will have what's called a Finsta, and this is their like fake Instagram account, and they just call this their spam account. So they put up like silly videos or dumb things that they don't want on their like main pretty feed, it's just kind of a throwaway account. So it doesn't necessarily mean they're hiding anything. It can mean they're hiding something, but for the most part, they use these Finsta accounts just for junk.
That makes sense. Got it. So, being curious and asking lots of questions, keeping the communication open, don't always assume it's the worst. It could
Right.
be a lot of things, right?
Yeah.
Um, okay, so someone asked, does DNS, work with a VPN?
So no, so that's why I don't allow VPNs. The Griffin app will actually allow you to make sure your kid is not able to use a VPN. But
Can
what
you
a
remind us
VPN,
what a VPN is too,
yeah,
please? Yeah,
so what
thank
a
you.
VPN is a virtual private network. So what it essentially does is it takes the device that has the VPN and virtually puts it on a different network. And so when it's on that different network, it is not subject to the controls that are on the network that has the controls. So it basically removes the device and puts it on this other network. Now, there are legitimate uses for VPNs. Like some parental control apps have a VPN that will force the device onto the protected network, which will ignore the restrictions or whatever that are on the home network, but it uses the app control for the protection settings. So some VPNs are okay if you're the one using it for like a parental control application, but if they're trying to use a VPN to circumvent your controls, that is one way that they can do that.
Thank you, Sarah. You have done an amazing job. You've covered so much ground. in a short amount of time, and you've really ramped us up, which, speaking for myself, I definitely needed it. So we thank you for everything that you've shared with us, that you've put together for us. We want to encourage everyone to follow you and your work on your social media sites. So if you forgot to take a picture of Sarah's business card slide, remember you can go back to the handouts, take a picture of that, and follow her work. We invite you to also follow Operation Parent on Facebook, Instagram, as well as LinkedIn. Oh, there's Amanda is amazing at the controls, so we've got it back up there for you guys to take a picture of Sarah's business information and where she is on social media as well. So please follow each of us in our continued good work. And don't forget to order your hot off the press. You are the first eligible to receive our ninth edition of our parent handbook, which is incredible, amazing. Um, we can't wait for you to see it and enjoy it and use it in your own homes to ramp up your prevention and education about all the things that our teens are dealing with in today's culture. But Sarah, we look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you for what you're doing to keep us on track and ahead of things and keeping our teens safe. We sure do appreciate you, and it's been a pleasure working with you.
Thank you. Yes, I was happy to be here. Happy to
And
help.
thanks so much. And for everyone that has joined us today, we value your time. We're so grateful that you would offer it to us in the middle of the day. And we look forward to staying connected and doing this good work together. So thanks, everybody. Have a good afternoon.